Hey Adventures, so we were tagged by Kayla Lenzen to do the Reread Book Tag. So let's get into it.
Where do you sit on the rereading scale from almost never to all the time?
For me, I reread fairly often. I think we'll probably get to more in depth of this answer with more questions as we go, so I think I'm probably going to leave it at that.
I reread almost the same amount as I read new books, just because I get so stuck in stories I love, and I just want to experience them again. Has that changed over your reading life?
I think it's probably lessened a little bit, and that's mostly because I'm finding all these new books that I really want to read. Brandon Sanderson is a relatively new author to me. 4 years or something ago, I started reading his books, and since then I've wanted to read them all, but I haven't had them, so I'm kind of playing catch up with him. There's also plenty of other authors and stories that I'm trying to read because I haven't read them before.
My rereading is decreasing. It's the same type of thing as Tony was saying. I'm trying to experience more stories and I'm trying different genres, things like that. So it's definitely going down, but that's only started within the last probably 3 months. When do you reread? Immediately after, or years later, or when the mood strikes?
For me, it's when the mood strikes, but that's kind of, I should explain that as I'm not a mood reader generally, but I will be reading something and I'll be thinking about a different story and I'm like, okay, I'm going to reread that story next, or I just want to reread it. I'm trying, and this will be the first year if I succeed, I'm trying to reread The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings every single year. So it's kind of just not exactly when the mood strikes, but it's not immediately after, and it's not necessarily years later.
For me, it's definitely when the mood strikes. I am more of a mood reader, and if I feel like reading something, I'll probably pick it up. Why do you reread books?
This is kind of a harder question to answer. I reread books because I like the books, but I also want to experience the world again, relive the stories. There's usually more stuff that you can pick up or learn from a story if you read through it a second time. Foreshadowing is a huge example of this. Most of the time you won't understand the foreshadowing until you reread the book and know how it ends. So
My answer is very similar as well. It's because I love experiencing those stories that are dear to me, and I love reliving them. Some stories are very special, especially the older books. So, how do you reread books? Faster or slower, or just the best bits?
when I reread books, it's usually about the same speed as when I read them the first time or the previous times. I'm a fairly slow reader, and that's just because I take it all in, and I don't know, I think I could probably read faster, but I would miss so much of the story if I decided to do that. So I generally read pretty slow, and I don't think it speeds up much when I'm rereading, and I definitely don't skip around and just read the best bits. That's like reading the last chapter of a book and that's it. That's not okay.
It really depends on how I read it the first time. So if I read it really fast the first time, I'll probably try and reread it more slowly, and vice versa, just because I am not super picky about getting every detail of the story. A lot of times I just want the overall view of the story. Who or what do you reread more specifically?
You're kind of probably expecting this answer, but Tolkien. Um, I really love rereading his stories because they're so deep, there's so much to them. But I would actually say that there's one author that I reread more than I read Tolkien, and that's Brian Jakes. I have read, I think I've only not read 3 of the books in the Redwall series. But all the other books I've read at least twice, I'm pretty sure. So I don't know how many books that is, but it's a lot, and I've reread most of them, so yeah.
I think The Giver is the book I've reread the most times, but the Boxcar Children series, I reread and reread those first 19 books so many times, I don't even remember. Is there a book you found better when you reread it?
So this answer might actually come as a surprise because most people hate this book, but Mockingjay. I just recently reread it and I really enjoyed it a lot more than the first time. I still have my qualms with it. There's some issues that I feel like could have been addressed differently, but I actually enjoyed it a lot more than the first time.
For me, I chose The Hunger Games. This is partially because this is a recent reread for me, so it's one that's fresh in my mind, and I did enjoy The Hunger Games because I took the time and I slowed down reading it as opposed to the first time when I just sped through it. And one that was worse?
So for me, this would probably be The Philosopher's Stone or The Sorcerer's Stone, Harry Potter, the first book in the Harry Potter series. And by saying that it was worse than the first time, I'm not saying that it was bad. I'm just saying that I enjoyed it less than I was expecting to. I think when I first read it, I had just come off of binge watching all 8 movies, and for the first time, and I wanted to read them so bad, and I was so excited to read them, and so I read them, and I was like, this was amazing, and I had nothing but fond memories for them. The second time through, about a month ago now, I really enjoyed it, but it was a little bit slower going. I kind of it took a little bit more time to get into the story than I was expecting it to.
I think the Percy Jackson and the Olympians series, more specifically Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief, was definitely a little bit less thrilling the second time I read it. I think a big part of that was my age. It is a middle grade book, and I read it. I'm an adult now. As hard as it is to believe, I am an adult. And I reread that, and it wasn't quite as enjoyable. Which one book have you reread the most times?
So, I did mention that I have reread Brian Jakes more times than Tolkien, but of specific books, I think The Hobbit probably wins. I've read it 4 or 5 times, and I think the most I've read any of the Redwall books is 3, maybe 4, but I don't think so. So I think The Hobbit wins on this one.
And I can't believe I forgot to mention these until I was filling out this last question, but I have reread the Little House on the Prairie series so many times, specifically these Happy Golden Years. That was my favorite one, and I read that one over and over again. I also read On the Banks of Plum Creek a lot. Those were just some favorites, and Little House on the Prairie series is another one that's very dear to me. So for the last question, we were supposed to be tagging someone, and we didn't want to step on any toes. We didn't know who would appreciate being tagged, so we tagged 2 people, and we have the Archive and A World of Endless Pages.
We will have both these channels linked in the description down below, as well as all these questions, and we will have the original creator linked down below as well.
Thanks again to Kayla Lenzen for tagging us. You guys should check out her channel. We'll have that one linked down below as well.
This was actually a really fun tag to do. We weren't expecting to be tagged to do it.
Yeah.
And so I was kind of surprised when I watched that video, and I was like, oh, we were just told to do this. So thank you for tagging us, Kayla, and we hope that other people enjoyed watching it, and if they want to, enjoy doing this tag as much as we did.
Please like and subscribe if you haven't already, and thanks for watching.
Stay warm.
It's too hot.